Welcome to Equipping Leaders, a podcast where I share tools and perspectives to equip leaders in self-development and team connection. I am your host, Natasha, and I am excited to share today's episode with you. Today's episode is about feedback and preparing ourselves to give it to others. Feedback is such a large topic that I could probably have an entire podcast series dedicated to it. There are two aspects I want to share today. The first is a tool for structured feedback, and the second comes from the work of Brené Brown on knowing when you are actually ready to give the feedback that will support and empower another person. There is a structured feedback process called SBI, which stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact. When providing feedback, we need to remember that feedback is part of a strong relationship. When we give great feedback, we're showing the other person that we care about them. When you believe you need to provide feedback, ask yourself first, what is it about me that made me notice this? This encourages the incredibly valuable element of self-reflection to go along with how you give feedback as well as receive it. When we notice something, could it be something that we need to work on or something that bothers us specifically? In that case, the other person does not necessarily need that feedback from you. But when it's not that, and it is something that could really help that other person evolve and develop professionally, this is where the SBI process comes into play. For situation, you're being descriptive about the scenario or situation that you noticed. You could start with the phrase, in this situation, and then move into behavior, right? I noticed this behavior. For example, when someone asks you a question after you give a presentation, you respond defensively. So in that you have the situation and the behavior. Then you're going to move into the impact, which a phrase for that could be, it has this impact on me or the team. It's more beneficial to say how it specifically impacts you because we don't want to hide behind an invisible army. We all know people who say, well, everyone or a bunch of people. The impact is coming from your perspective, even if you're speaking about the team. Let's continue our example. So we'll just do the situation, behavior, impact all together. When someone asks you a question after you give a presentation, you respond defensively. It makes me think that you're not open to feedback or insight, and it shuts down those in the room who could provide additional valuable insight or perspective. Those are the impacts that you have noticed and that you can attest to, and you're not putting words in anyone else's mouth. We also want to give feedback from the right mindset. In her book, Dare to Lead, Brené Brown curated a list that tells you when you're ready to give feedback. So consider each of these statements starting with, I know I'm ready to give feedback when. I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you. I'm willing to put the problem in front of us rather than between us or sliding it towards you. I'm ready to listen, ask questions, and accept that I may not fully understand the issue. I'm ready to acknowledge what you do well instead of just picking apart your mistakes. I recognize your strengths and how you can use them to address your challenges. I can hold you accountable without shaming or blaming. I am open to owning my part. I can genuinely thank someone for their efforts rather than just criticizing them for their feelings. I can talk about how resolving these challenges will lead to growth and opportunity. I can model the vulnerability and openness that I expect to see from you. I love this list so much because when I think about my growth and development, my best leaders and mentors have demonstrated these mindsets. It's also a great filter to run through to rethink how you want to approach and deliver feedback to someone you lead. If you use this as a filter and then implement the SBI process, you'll be able to provide someone with really great, actionable feedback that's empowering and is seen as a growth effort. It's also a great way to explore why and how you give feedback and how you can get better and more attuned to those you lead. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Equipping Leaders podcast. For more leadership development content, you can visit my website, natashacheyenne.com, where you will find my leadership journal with dozens of articles and the Cultivation Cafe, which is always growing and has leadership frameworks, book recommendations, and inclusion and mental health resources. You can also follow me on Instagram at novel_Natasha or at Equipping Leaders Podcast and on Twitter at Natasha Cheyenne. Join me next week for another episode.